Welcome to Dialogue of Exploration.
Today we're going to be talking about the shadow self. So I was wondering, Julia, if you could explain a bit about the shadow self.
I think that the best way to describe the shadow self is that we were initially, at some point, we were completely whole. So whenever that point was, how much at the beginning of our existence, I don't know whether that was in the womb when we were first born or at some stage there was the whole of us, but through childhood, to survive, to be accepted by our parents and the people who are looking after us, our brothers, our sisters, our teachers, to survive that, we found that there were parts of ourselves that we found were not acceptable, so we would hide that part away. We would disown it if it didn't seem that it was acceptable to be singing idly at the table, or if there was expressions of anger or anything that didn't seem to be acceptable, or even maybe if we were an artistic person in a sporty family or the other way around, then those aspects of ourselves we might even lose. So it meant that we would hide parts to survive, we would maybe disown parts, and we would maybe lose parts. And those could be aspects that we saw being expressed in our family. So there may have been extreme expressions of anger, or maybe addictive behaviour, maybe alcoholism, or all sorts of overt sexuality. There can be all sorts of things that we were not comfortable with, that we put away, but were actually parts of us as a whole human being, if they were being expressed in a way that would mean that our life could work well. So the parts that we hide or lose or disown are not necessarily the aspects that are negative characteristics, and I think that's the bit that can be confusing when we talk about the shadow, that we can actually put bits in the shadow of ourselves that is our gold. So it could be being really successful, being an orator, being very chatty if we were told to shut up, or keep quiet, or any of those things. We may lose the part that could speak out and have a lot to say. We could lose a part of ourselves that perhaps was a musician or a writer, or an aspect that was never developed. So the stuff in our shadow isn't necessarily aspects that we find difficult. Does that? I think
that makes sense. So what you're saying is, if there's parts of our lives that we've had to bury or disown for whatever reason, they are our shadow self, and they're not all negative parts of ourselves. They could actually have been positive sides of ourselves that still we've had to bury to survive at some point in our life. Yeah,
it's the survival. As children, we had to survive, and any part of ourselves that seemed that wasn't going to be accepted, to a child that is like a danger signal, like danger, danger, and therefore we've got lots of ways of surviving and adapting, and that is the way, as you know, it's incredible really, we do survive, and we come out into the world as adults with sometimes all those parts hidden, but we have managed to survive. But it was interesting because we were chatting earlier, weren't we, that I was brought up very much entrenched in the Bible and Christianity, because my upbringing was very much of that kind of genre, and I belonged to a youth group, so there was a lot of influence, and that actually I started learning about this shadow aspects and shadow self right from the beginnings, because it was Jesus. I've got it written down because I don't think I can remember. Every time I try and remember this quote, I can't remember it, so I've written it down, and it says that Jesus said, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." And I think that therefore, right from a very young age, I had an understanding and an interest in how to become whole and express all of ourselves. But to do that, we had to learn about how to bring forth the aspects that we had hidden, which therefore we deemed unacceptable. And in deeming something unacceptable, therefore it can be hidden for a long, long time, and sometimes never brought forth, which is the thing that then is disappointing, because we're not going through life as the whole of our expression.
Absolutely, which is actually our birthright. But what you've just said there is very interesting. First of all, how do people recognise their shadow selves, either in the positive or negative aspect? And once they've made that recognition, how do they then integrate that into their lives so they're more whole?
Every relationship we are in is an opportunity for us to become whole. Because when we are in relationship with one another, we are seeing ourselves reflected back in many ways. Now, sometimes we'll meet somebody and we'll think, oh, they're just like us, and it all feels very easy. And that is aspects, obviously, we'll see ourselves, which we've probably got integrated already. But anybody we meet, or it doesn't even mean we meet them, we may see them on the television, or they may be a public figure, that we have a strong energy towards, and that can be both in the negative and the positive. So if we see, and it can be people we know, of course, that we have strong feelings of, we really don't like an aspect of them, or we really don't like the way they do things, or they really touch our buttons and they really, make us angry or upset. And the other way, somebody we strongly admire and we, really look up to, and we really love what they do. Anytime that we have that going on, that will indicate that that's a part of ourself reflected there. And in the positive, it's an easier thing. So if we strongly admire somebody who's, an actor or writer, or I was always admiring writers when I wasn't writing, and I was always attracted to writers, and I always hung out with them, and and musicians, which you're helping with my shadow side of the musician. I've always been attracted to musicians, and as a child was always told to shut up when I sung. So actually that's an aspect of myself that definitely got hidden away, that you're helping to bring forth. But those are kind of aspects of ourselves that in the positive, or we admire somebody who's standing out there, or living their dream, or doing their thing, or speaking out, or working for charity, or whatever it is that we go, wow, that's what I'd like to do. The negative is a harder thing to integrate, because what we see in the mirror of somebody else and we don't like it, then to actually recognise that that's a part of ourself can be the challenge. So, do you want me to go on, or do you?
Yes, no, that's great.
So, if we meet somebody and something they do really annoys us, then it's always worth recognising that something that I was taught, which I always found useful, was that when one finger points at, oh, I don't like that, three are pointing back. So if we don't like the way somebody's always, extrovert, for instance, and always the centre of attention, we really don't like it about the person, then it's worth seeking in the shadows and looking where we've hidden away the part of us that wants to shine and be centre stage. So perhaps when we were little, we were, being extrovert or being noisy or loud, and we came from a family that said, shush, don't show off, don't do that, and it became important that we hid that part away to survive. Then every time we see it in the form of another person, we can be really, not like it. So it's really important that we recognise that we can bring that aspect, what it would take to bring that aspect out, because we've been told it's bad, we don't like it in ourselves.
Absolutely.
So therefore, what can happen is that it'll come out of the shadows every so often in a very extrovert and overt way, and serve us badly when it's not properly integrated. So we might get drunk or something and completely, be loud and out there, but it doesn't serve us because we're then embarrassed, or people tell us we've been, shouldn't have done it, or all those things. And that tends to happen when it's not fully integrated. If we think about it and integrate it, in a way that's positive, we think, how can we bring that part in that's going to serve us? So how can we be more expressive, more open, more noisy, whatever, and people like it? Then, of course, it integrates in a good way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, well, that's very interesting. So it's quite fascinating to me that that if we've been taught as a kid that to be extrovert is wrong, that's the part of ourselves that we push away, and then grow up judging other people that are extrovert for that, because that's what we've been taught and trained to do effectively.
Yes, I suppose. I mean, it can go to all sorts of things. When in one of my own kind of stories, or reclaiming something from the shadows, was that I come from an upbringing that you got on with it. That you know, when something happened, like when my mother died, it was absolutely that you carried on. You didn't wear your heart on your sleeve. You know, that we had to just push on and not show our grief and not show our feelings and look after other people. And that was really, really ingrained in my sister and I. So we did. We carried on. We did as was expected, and we were, you know, told that, you know, Mummy would want that, and da 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 da. So that was what we did. And what I discovered was that that is a skill, which, you know, I'm glad I've got. But what would happen is that when I luckily this doesn't happen now, because obviously I have looked after people a lot through grief. But when I was younger, if I came across somebody who was expressing grief, or having a lot of time given them to grieve or to express their sadness, or time off work or time off school, or any of those things that I clearly think now I really think are very, very valid, because I had disowned that part of myself. Because, for instance, my mother died on the Friday, I was sent to running club on the Saturday morning, I went to school on Monday, we just went on. Because I had to do that, I had lost the part of me that needed to collapse, as it were, and grieve and express. Then when I saw it in other people, I would feel, well, for goodness sake, what's wrong with them, and why aren't they? You know, and that would be within me. There was another part of me that was going, oh, you know, I mustn't think that, but that was the truth. And I had to reclaim the part of myself that needed to stop and grieve and express, and I had to reclaim that and you know, go and have therapy and do all the things that we need to do in those situations. It took me a long time though, and of course it means that if you don't reclaim it, you don't have the capacity to hold another person.
Absolutely.
And that's one example, but there are, you know, we can all think it's quite a useful exercise to think about people. You know, often something that I'd suggest people I work with do when they're accessing their shadow is to perhaps think of 3 people that they strongly admire and 3 people they strongly touch their buttons, or they despise, or they don't like. And that can be, you know, friends and family, as well as people on television that somebody they see and really they don't like. Because if they write down their 3 characteristics of each person that really get to them, or they strongly admire, and then really seek to see where that aspect is in themselves which they haven't brought forth, that can be a really powerful exercise.
Absolutely, I can see that. I would like to come back to what you were just saying there. So somebody that's experienced hiding or being stoical through grief, for example. So for somebody in that position to then reclaim that part of themselves, is there a process that people can go through to do that? I mean, I know you sort of skimmed over the top by saying therapy, but I mean, is there something in this moment that people can do that allows them to reconnect with that and start bringing that part of themselves to the fore?
I think that the first step is, of course, really, again, like we explored in childhood wounds, is that if we're in touch with our body, that's the place that the first signal will be that, you know, if somebody's, if somebody has, for instance, put away the part of them that can express their sadness or their grief, or, you know, just carries on, then if they, often it feels like it's the head that they go, oh, for goodness sake, about somebody else, but there will be something in the body. So I think it's starting to really notice and really, again, be self-reflective. I think all of this is actually about noticing ourselves and noticing ourselves in relationship with one another, and noticing that if we start to feel irritated by somebody, or feel, you know, have a judgment, have a something that we instantly don't like about somebody, that actually the first thing is to stop, press pause, think this is to do with me. So as long as we start to think it's to do with me, then it may be so ingrained, the carrying on, or the not expressing anger, or the being quiet, or the not being extrovert, or all sorts of things that we have hidden in the shadows might be so much part of who we think we are, that it is really challenging exercise to think that when somebody is irritating us, that it isn't them, and that it's us. And that is the first orientation, and it's a big paradigm shift, because I think that we're set up to go, that person is the cause of our, feeling, upset, disappointed, cross. Now, often it doesn't mean that the person in front of us isn't doing something, but actually, if they are touching our buttons and we are reacting, then they are offering us the opportunity to be our teacher, really, because within them they are holding a part of themselves, or they're expressing a part of themselves that is within us. There is always the good side to any characteristic. So again, I had a really, really big effort to try and find. One of my friends was incredibly full of revenge towards some people who had bullied him when he was young, and his feelings of revenge were repeatedly expressed, and every time he expressed his anger towards his bullies, I would have a big reaction against that. So it indicated to me that there was some place inside me I hadn't owned revenge in my being, because it was something very alien to me.
Right.
And it took me a long, long, long time to find it and find my way of how I would get revenge in a way that felt positive, because there's always a positive way to reclaim, and a characteristic that feels, oh no, that's really scary, that's really a not nice characteristic. And I found that my way of seeking revenge was actually to make sure my life worked out, and had worked out despite being crushed.
Right.
So it's how we will find those characteristics that we really don't like. We think that surely can't be a part of me. To actually find that we all have within us all aspects, and that if it's hidden in the shadows, it can spoil our greatest expression. It can spoil us going forward. It can it can manifest as insecurity, as jealousy, as envy, as all sorts of characteristics that hold us back. Whereas in fact, if we integrate them and own them and make them part of the whole of us, then we're free.
Absolutely, absolutely. So can you sort of shed some light, because you've said a few times there, you found in yourself, you found these aspects in yourself. So
yeah.
How did you find them?
How did I find them? That's an interesting question. I just have to think how I found them. I think that it is a commitment at the deepest level. We need to commit to being self-reflective, and to really noticing ourselves, and that we are the common denominator in all our relationships, and that we are the centre of our own universe. So therefore, anything that is happening in our life is, in fact, can trace back to us, and that therefore that can be challenging work, particularly if we've had hardship when we were young, and that's repeated through our life, and we can become a victim of circumstances and other people. So to actually start to notice and take responsibility, and know that if things keep happening, if we get repeated patterns in our life, as we explored before, if people keep making us angry and that keeps happening, then we have to see that we are the common denominator. So if we keep meeting people who shut us down, or don't see us, or hurt us, or any of these things, or if we meet people who we we think are irritating us, then we first of all have to start noticing. So we notice it. If it will be in the body, so we will feel the irritation in our stomach, or we'll get the hurt in our chest. So then that essentially means that you have found that there is something within you that you haven't brought forth. So it's then thinking how that would be. It can take time. How would it be to reclaim that part that can speak out, for instance? Because if we repeatedly find that people annoy us who are always saying what they want, for instance, speaking out what their needs, and they'll always say what they want, and they ask what they want, and they'll always ask for their holidays, or they'll ask to have time off, or they'll say what they feel, or they'll say if they need anything, and they irritate us because we never ask for anything. Then it's thinking, right, that's to do with the part of me that doesn't ask for anything, or doesn't ask for my needs to be met. So when we've discovered it, then it's exploring what would it be like to bring that out of the shadows. What would our life be like? Because it can change our entire life, change our relationships,
Absolutely.
Change how people see us. Because if somebody's always been the person who does exactly what everybody wants them to do, and suddenly they stop doing it, all relationships change.
Absolutely.
And in my experience, both personally and with the people I work with, it's always for the good. There's always transformation. There's always deepening of connection and relationship. So if we dare to do it, it's always for the good. And that's the thing to remember. But yeah, to start speaking out and saying, actually, no, I don't want to do that, when you've always said yes to everything, or actually what I feel is this, and it can, be, of course, challenging. So we have to seek, what would it be like to bring it out of the shadows? Could we imagine our life with that? If we're going to really go for it, if we've always wanted to sing, like me, and been told endlessly that I can't, what's it like to start to actually spend a bit of time seeing if you can sing in tune? It's much easier to go, oh, I can't sing. What's it like if you've always wanted to write, and but actually, what happens if people don't like what I write? There's all that. It takes a lot of courage.
Absolutely.
And it changes our life.
It
so
does.
does that answer the question?
That does answer the question. So I think, just to recap, what we're saying here is, if any situation, people, actions touches our buttons or sticks, then it's our stuff, it's our thing. And basically what we're saying in short term is to use the body as a barometer. The body is always going to instruct you as to what's going on before that's developed into some story. Oh, they've done, or they've said, or they've upset me. What we're saying is, before any of that, there's something going on in the body, and it's that we need to be aware of and in touch with.
Yeah, the body holds all the wisdom.
The body holds all the wisdom. It's very interesting because we have said before, haven't we, the body is actually the one part of ourselves that cannot be outside of this moment.
Yeah, yes. We are in this body as we're on this human journey. Our body stores up all the events of the past, it stores up all our reactivity as a little child. The body then accounts for everything, it remembers everything, and that's why it then will, show ourselves in the mirror of these relationships. And of course, as we said in the conscious relationship one, intimacy is an even bigger one that can show up where we've lost parts of ourselves, and we'll often go towards a partner who holds absolutely the aspects of ourselves we've hidden. And that's where, again, we can go towards, if we've, been told to not speak out, we can get very attracted to a very chatty partner.
Right.
And actually, over time, it can get out of balance if we don't own it for ourselves, and that's when things can, show in relationships. So it's recognising that we'll often be strongly attracted to someone holding parts of ourselves that we haven't claimed from the shadows.
Oh, interesting. So does that work both ways? Maybe we'll be attracted to somebody because we don't want to address those issues, or maybe we'll be attracted to somebody because they're expressing something that we want.
I think at the deepest level, we want to become whole.
Right.
So we will be attracted to that person because we want to claim that in ourselves. But particularly in old-fashioned marriages, where it was people described the other as their other half, actually they never had to own them. So I think that it is a space where people go, oh, I don't have to do it. So, you know, they can be attracted to somebody who's, you know, living out the part of themselves that they are not living out, and it allows you not to, but it means that you're not as whole. So I think we're more conscious now that to become even more deeply connected, there is that opportunity to two people become more whole.
It's an interesting expression, that my other half. That's very an interesting observation. So with that quote you had, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. I think that's such an important thing, isn't it? Because actually these parts of us that we hold in and don't express, whether they are the gold or the
darker stuff, I suppose.
Stuff,
yeah.
That either one of those can bring us down.
Absolutely. And that's why starting to notice and really become conscious, actually, isn't it, about our own reactivity and our own the energy, where the energy is, where we see a yearning or a longing. As you said, not owning our gold is as damaging as not bringing forth the aspects that we deem darker. I mean, they're all aspects that, if they're integrated, then we're walking through in a much more, well, we're safe within ourselves because we know ourselves very deeply.
Absolutely.
And it means that we are able to relate at a much deeper level, a much more connected level. We don't cut off from people because what we see in them we don't like because we haven't owned it in ourselves. So we claim ourselves back and we become a whole, and therefore we can have much deeper relationships and much more fun expressing ourselves.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. The more whole we are, the more we can share with other people.
Yes.
And can be shared with us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So something else you just said there is about the reactiveness or reactions that we have. I think all of these reactions are born out of this shadow self, aren't they? Something that we've not addressed, or something we've held back on, or we've hidden or disowned.
Yes, absolutely, because and again it goes back to the childhood wounding. We had to survive, so therefore if we were told that a part of ourselves wasn't acceptable or a part of ourselves wasn't seen, then actually that hurt us. So they're actually connected up, that the places where we got hurt are also the places where we went, right, I better hide that bit. So actually by bringing forth that part of ourselves, we can dissolve the wound and heal.
Yeah, dissolve the wound and heal. That's where the courage comes in, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. It does take courage. It does take courage to really, really acknowledge when our stuff arises, when we have our buttons hit, when we have reacted to something, to really acknowledge that that is to do with us, and therefore some work's needed to be done, and that we are the people that are responsible for healing our wounds, although they can heal within relationship as well, with the support. If we can support one another in our processes.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. We can support each other within our processes, which, while in a relationship of love and trust, means that you can really investigate different aspects of each other, actually, that have been hidden, disowned or lost.
Yes, and wouldn't it be fantastic if in every single relationship we had that love and trust to do it with each other?
Ah, yes.
And that's in every friendship, if we're working in a group with people, if we're in a love relationship, that we were all committed to our own self-discovery, self-reflection, and that we were responsible for our own journey of becoming whole.
I think that's a great note to finish on. It is about each of us becoming responsible for our own journey of becoming whole, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.